Why are Mormons prohibited from drinking something that science says has a lot of health benefits? Welcome to this edition of Viewpoint on Mormonism. I'm your host, Bill McKeever, founder and director of Mormonism Research Ministry. With me today is Eric Johnson, my colleague at MRM. Today we're looking at an article that was in Newsbacks on December 2nd, 2015. The article's title is Researchers Uncover 8 Ways Coffee Improves Health. Now, we know from the word of wisdom found in the Doctrine and Covenants, Mormons are not supposed to drink coffee. It's merely mentioned as a hot drink. This is interpreted to mean coffee and tea. But yet it appears that there have been a number of scientific studies that show coffee is actually good for you. If it's good for you, why would the Mormon Church prohibit its members from drinking it? Let's look at what this article has to say, Eric.
It says coffee's reputation as a food to avoid has been replaced with hundreds of studies that show coffee may be one of the healthiest drinks in the world.
So let me stop you there. Hundreds of studies that show coffee may be one of the healthiest drinks in the world. This isn't just an isolated study. There's been numerous studies that have been done on coffee drinking.
It continues, a Harvard study released this month found that coffee drinkers who drink 3 to 5 cups a day are less likely to die from any cause than non-drinkers. The study published in Circulation found that coffee drinkers of both regular and decaf had lower rates of dying from heart disease, stroke, neurological diseases, and suicide. Overall, the risk of dying was reduced by 15%.
Now notice it says 3 to 5 cups. I wonder if that would include the cup I use every day. Maybe I am drinking that much because I only have 2 of those in the course of a day. But anyway, let's go through some of the health benefits that these studies have shown coffee provide to those who imbibe of it.
First is the heart risk. A study released in June found that drinking 3 to 5 cups of coffee every day lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease by up to 21%, according to a report presented at a meeting of the European Society of Cardiology.
So that's obviously a big concern that many of us in the United States have, is heart disease, of course. But then it says diabetes also. It says that those who drank 3 to 4 cups a day lowered their risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 25% when compared to those who drank fewer than 2 cups daily, and that other studies have shown even better results, up to 67%. I would say that's pretty significant, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, this is not like, 1 or 2% where you could kind of say, well, that's no big deal, but that sounds pretty significant to me.
As far as melanoma, there was a study published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute. It found that people who drank 4 or more cups of coffee daily lowered their cancer risk by 20% when compared to those who didn't drink coffee. And some protection was found in those who drank as little as 1 cup of caffeinated coffee a day, but decaffeinated coffee offered no protection regardless of the amount consumed.
So if you're concerned about melanoma, you want to get away from that decaf stuff and drink the leaded coffee. Also, this is one that I'm particularly interested in, and that is memory. A double-blind study from Johns Hopkins University studied non-coffee drinkers and found that drinking coffee after a learning session improved long-term memory. Researchers gave participants a 200 milligram tablet of caffeine or a placebo 5 minutes after studying a series of images. 1 day later, they were shown another series of images, some the same as the day before, some completely different, and some similar. Those who took the caffeine pill were better at identifying the similar pictures rather than citing them as the same as previous images.
Maybe those who didn't get the pill were falling asleep. I don't know. Caffeine has a way to keep you up. The next one is age-related cognitive decline in Alzheimer's. Several studies have shown that older people who regularly drink coffee can slow or even reverse cognitive decline and can significantly reduce their risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. 2 studies that were published found that coffee improved the attention span and cognitive function in older adults. Another study found that the seniors who had drunk 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day for 21 years lowered their risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia by 65%. That's amazing, 65%.
That is a high number. And again, we're not talking about 1 or 2%. We're talking about some incredibly high percentages here, which I think gives some real credibility to these studies. Now, I'm wondering if a Mormon if a Mormon was to read this, what would they be thinking? Why are we being told as Latter-day Saints not to imbibe in coffee when it seems to have these type of health benefits?
A rebuttal to our book, Questions to Ask Your Mormon Friend, that we wrote in 1994, we had a chapter on this very issue of the word of wisdom, and the response given by the Mormon apologist was that coffee was dangerous because it could possibly scald you in your esophagus when you would drink it. But if that's the case, then why do Latter-day Saints drink, for instance, hot chocolate, or for that matter, what about soup? I mean, that's a hot drink that you're putting down your esophagus. That also could burn. That wasn't a very convincing argument to us.
Oh, I think you're right. And when we responded to that, we made it clear that we didn't think that was a very good argument. To say that, well, hot drinks are not good because you could possibly hurt yourself by drinking them. Well, you can hurt yourself doing a lot of things. You can choke eating meat. Now, I know the word of wisdom says you're only supposed to eat meat in times of extreme cold or famine, and that's questionable in and of itself. But certainly there's all sorts of anomalies that could take place in just about every area of human life. So to say that we're not supposed to drink hot coffee or hot tea because we could scald ourselves, I think is a little bit silly. And besides, remember, folks, the word of wisdom at the very beginning says it's only a suggestion. It's not by commandment. The Mormon Church made it a commandment in the 20th century. That's when following it became mandatory if a Mormon hoped to get a temple recommend. You were asked, do you keep the word of wisdom? Prior to that, it was understood to be merely a suggestion, and really, Joseph Smith said it was mainly for officers in the church. Officers in the church did have to comply with the word of wisdom, but for the most part, it was just a suggestion. They considered it a good suggestion, no doubt, because there's other prohibitions in there as well when it comes to alcohol and tobacco. But still, this whole idea of the hot drink being understood as coffee or tea, I've always found to be kind of silly.
But the most important thing about this, besides it being a command today, is that you can't get into the Mormon temple without it. I mean, when you're hearing of all of these positive things that come out of coffee, I'm not sure how the church can continue making that a commandment when it was never meant for that originally.
I think one of the reasons why Joseph Smith put that in there, and I really do believe this, it was like, look, they believe me on everything else I tell them. Watch what I get away with when I tell them this. And sure enough, the people just fall in line and will believe whatever he tells them.
And many people think maybe he was trying to get back at Emma because
there are historians that have actually said that. Yeah. You're absolutely right. What about Parkinson's disease?
It says studies have found caffeine significantly reduces the risk of Parkinson's disease. A study of Japanese Americans living in Hawaii found those who drank more than 4 cups of coffee daily reduced their risk 5-fold. A later study found that coffee was just as protective for women.
And then this is one I like, weight loss. A study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that drinking 2 to 4 cups of coffee daily helped dieters from regaining lost weight. Researchers believe coffee's high caffeine content helps the body fight the gradual weight gain that defeats so many dieters who have initially lost weight. I don't want to make light of people who struggle with weight. Weight is a significant problem for many Americans. And it's a significant problem for many Latter-day Saints. Just living in Utah, you see that. But I wonder why, if the Mormon Church is really concerned about the health of its members, how come that isn't emphasized in a temple interview? Like, do you eat 5 candy bars in a day? Are you downing, a liter of sugar Coca-Cola or something? Those questions aren't even in there.
I mean, how often do you go to McDonald's? How often do you eat bacon with your breakfast, et cetera, et cetera? It seems like there's more problems with the weight gain that could happen, and yet people who might be way overweight are still getting temple recommends, but somebody who admits to their bishop that they're drinking coffee will not be given that temple recommend.
And again, I'm not making light of that struggle. I'm certainly not doing that. I'm just wondering why, and that's the question we ask. Why, if this drink is actually good for you, are Mormon members being told not to drink it? So much so that if they do, they forfeit their eligibility to go into a temple, which is absolutely essential if they hope to reach exaltation. It was Joseph Fielding Smith in his book Doctrines of Salvation where he taught that even 1 cup of tea could ban you from reaching that exaltation that you seek. In Volume 2, page 16 of Doctrines of Salvation, Joseph Fielding Smith, the 10th president of the church, said, "Salvation and a cup of tea. You cannot neglect little things. Oh, a cup of tea is such a little thing. It is so little. Surely it doesn't amount to much. Surely the Lord will forgive me if I drink a cup of tea." Yes, he said, he will forgive you because he is going to forgive every man who repents. But my brethren, if you drink coffee or tea or take tobacco, are you letting a cup of tea or a little tobacco stand in the road and bar you from the celestial kingdom of God, where you might otherwise have received a fullness of glory? That's a pretty serious admonition.
One final point they make is suicide. A Harvard review of 3 large studies found that men and women who drank 2 to 4 cups of coffee daily had half the risk of suicide as those who drank very little or no coffee, or those who chose decaffeinated.
That seems like a huge benefit right there, and certainly suicide is no laughing matter, even in the state of Utah, a very religious state. Suicide among young people is certainly a problem.
Well, yes, and especially here in Utah, we have a very high suicide rate, and you can count that for whatever reason, but could it possibly be a lot of Latter-day Saints who possibly could be helped with this drink are not allowed to have it?
And I'm sure they're not trying to imply that this is the cure-all to our health problems in the world. It certainly isn't that, but it does seem awfully strange that you have so many areas in which coffee seems to help. Heart risk, diabetes, melanoma, memory, age-related cognitive decline and Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, weight loss, and suicide. Those are pretty significant health issues.
We get nothing out of this from a Starbucks or Beans and Brew, but we just want to point out this just doesn't seem like a good rule to have. If coffee is good, why aren't Mormons allowed to have it?
I wonder if enough Mormons got together and started petitioning the leadership of the church that maybe they would relax its prohibition on coffee. That remains to be seen, but we know from the past that pressure put on the leadership does get change in a lot of these areas that you never thought that they would make any type of course correction.
Thank you for listening. If you would like more information regarding Mormonism Research Ministry, we encourage you to visit our website at www.mrm.org, where you